So this is probably one of my first webinars that I'm doing on the crowdfunding. And this is, I'll be doing a series of them as well, just giving little snippets. And I'll share with you what we do towards the end of the webinar. So this is just a short half-hour webinar, just giving you the introduction to it. Now, I'm sure that some of you might be very well versed, just looking to maybe find out a few tips. And some of you may be very new to the whole crowdfunding thing. And in this cartoon, you can see that it says our first attempt at crowdfunding isn't going very well. And usually, people's first attempt at crowdfunding doesn't go very well. And there's reasons for that, which I'm going to go through today. So some of you know me, some of you have no idea who I am. Basically, that's me. And some of you saw my picture in the video. And I wear a number of different hats. I acquired iPledge a few years ago now, which is a very boutique crowdfunding platform. And what I found out that when I was going out and teaching people about crowdfunding, that it wasn't really so much the platform that I really needed to care about. I needed to care about people understanding how to put together a successful crowdfunding campaign. And that's what I've really been focusing on. So I haven't really been focusing on the crowdfunding platform itself. I've been focusing on how I can help educate people to get a good campaign. So the information I'm about to share with you today, it doesn't matter what platform you put it on. All of them, whether it be Kickstarter, GoFundMe, iPledge, Indiegogo, they all pretty much have the same methodology in putting a crowdfunding platform together. I also own a registered training organization called the Wise Academy that I'm in the process of getting off the ground again as well. I've had it for 10 years. And I'm a permanent part-time lecturer at the Kaplan Business School in Brisbane, where I teach numerous things in their undergraduate business and also their MBA program. And then my volunteer that I give back to the community is I'm also the chair of the IT Forum here on the Gold Coast. As you can tell, I seem to still have an American accent despite living here in Australia for 24 years. Lived in Canberra for 16 years until the cold got a bit too much, and now I've moved to the Gold Coast. And after I saw that it was snowing this weekend down in Canberra, I think I made a very good move just because of the weather. I'm very passionate about education, and I have a very diverse range of things. And if you're interested, you can just look at my LinkedIn profile whenever you have some time. So what we're going to go over today are three main things. What is crowdfunding? How crowdfunding can help your project or your organization. And then the third one are three key areas to focus on before launching your crowdfunding campaign. And to a certain extent, this is even before you even think about putting your crowdfunding campaign together. And I'll highlight as to why you need to focus on these three things as we go on. So I hope that's good. And so I'll entertain questions towards the end, and we'll just keep going. So just a few stats to kind of set the stage. So Kickstarter's been around for quite some time. They're basically seen as the grandfather of the crowdfunding platforms. They have raised the most money as far as I know. Here's what's interesting. If you look up here at the success rate, 35%. That's not that high, at all. So when you look at that and look at these other stats, look at the sweet spot here. 1,000 to basically almost 10,000, that seems to be the real sweet spot where people tend to raise the money. We do hear of these multi-million-dollar raises, or those that raised over $1 million. And now these stats were just recent, probably last week when I put the presentation together. Only 252 of all their campaigns have gone over the $1 million mark. So if you're looking to use crowdfunding as a way to, really do that capital raising, think hard if you're working over in this area. If you look at these, less than 1,000 raised, 15,000, 1,000 to 999, there's your safe spot. All right.
Excuse me, Dion. We can't see your screen.
Oh, you can't?
No.
Okay.
And Lorraine has said send a text too about that. So if you
I didn't see that. Let me just see. Let me just see if I can find another screen. Can you see this one?
Hey, thank
There
you.
you go. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
that's it. Beautiful.
Okay. So I was going from tell you what I'll do. Let's see if it can still, can you still see that screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Margaret? Okay, great. All right, super. So, so when we look at the successfully funded projects, you can see here, and then when you look at the unsuccessfully funded projects, you know, when you're looking at the percentage that are funded, you can see that the majority only really get to be 1% to 20% funded. So I'm not sharing these stats to, you know, to put a damper on crowdfunding. It's just to give you a reality check of what is there. Okay. So what is crowdfunding? You know what? The basic of it is that crowdfunding is storytelling with a goal. And that's really, really important, because if you don't tell the compelling story, nobody's really going to care. And it sounds pretty harsh, but that's the truth. There's 5 different types of crowdfunding. There's equity-based crowdfunding, which we're starting to hear more about with the government here in Australia, you know, allowing equity crowdfunding to be legal. We heard a lot about equity-based crowdfunding in the US through the Jobs Act. And this is where investors receive a stake in the company. Here in Australia, it's for up to 10,000. This is not my specialty area. I'm going to have other people come on that I'll interview that are specialists in the equity-based crowdfunding. But once again, still the stuff I shared today, the basics, still apply to equity-based crowdfunding. The difference is that when you start talking about equity-based crowdfunding, is you have to determine what your shares are worth in the company. So when people buy into it, what are they getting? The second one is property real estate crowdfunding. It hasn't really taken off here in Australia. It is big in other countries with real estate crowdfunding, and I know there are various platforms in the US about real estate crowdfunding. And this is basically where you raise funds from a crowd of investors for a particular project or you know, development. Then we have donation-based crowdfunding, and we see this very often with crowdfunding platforms such as GoFundMe, you know, even with iPledge. Well, iPledge, we accept donation-based crowdfunding, Indiegogo. Many of the platforms can offer reward-based crowdfunding and also donation-based crowdfunding. And this is where obviously you contribute to a charitable cause. In one sense, you don't get anything tangible in return, but you do feel warm and fuzzy by giving to a specific cause. Lending-based crowdfunding, there's a number of examples of this. Once again, something that I have not done. This is where investors are repaid for their investment over a period of time. So it's more loan as opposed to equity-based, where equity-based you actually get the rewards, you know, after, say, the company exits. Today, I'm going to really be focusing on this reward-based crowdfunding. So this is where your backers or pledgers or donors, whatever word you want to use, receive a tangible item or service in return for their funds. And we'll look at various ways that you can use reward-based crowdfunding. I'm not going to touch upon the rewards. I do a whole webinar and seminar on that because there's a bit of a science to that as well. Okay. So how can crowdfunding help your project or organization? So we're on to the second point that we'll go over. It can help your project or organization in many ways, and it just depends on, you know, what your organization's about. So some of you said you're from not-for-profits, some of you are representing startups, various individual projects. With regards to the commercial, crowdfunding is not used for general running costs, okay? That's usually a rule set by many. Oops, sorry, I'm just seeing somebody has some other stuff there, okay. So yeah, so your crowdfunding ideas must be project-based. right? You can use crowdfunding for an implementation of new initiatives. So we see many not-for-profits and even other startups going, well, we want to open up, do this new project, and we're looking for somebody to help contribute to help do the program, right? We need money to develop a program. So these new initiatives are really, crowdfunding is very good for them. Leverage for grants. So those of us here in Australia, which I'm pretty sure most of you are, we know that we have a lot of grant programs, especially in Queensland. One of the things that crowdfunding has been really good for is that if you show that you've actually gone and done a crowdfunding campaign and you've raised a little bit of money, or you show that you have a number of backers, what that's doing is it's giving either social proof to the government body, or even showing that you went out and you're not totally relying on government funds. So that becomes very important because, government, as much as they do give out a fair bit of money, they still have to justify why they're giving that out. And for those of you who have been involved with the government sector, totally know what I mean. So crowdfunding is very good for leveraging these grants. You can do it for lodging IP. As we know, if you're going for patents, it's a very expensive project. You can do it to get the funds for prototyping. So depending on certain projects, you might need to get the materials to prototype before you actually take it to full manufacture. Proof of concept trials, external skills and knowledge, you might need to do it. One of the things that I'm also looking at, like even with iPledge, is the importance of educating people about crowdsourcing. So not so much about raising money to pay people, but going out and actually crowdsourcing the IP. And I was fortunate enough to go over to Washington, D.C. back in June, and I went to a crowdsourcing conference. It was fantastic, just the way that government itself is using crowdsourcing over in Washington. You can use crowdfunding for raising tools and equipment, and you can do that also for community groups as well. App development and games. Now I'm just going to say something about app development and the games. It can be done. It's just challenging because when you think about, we have an app on a mobile device, how you give back to that. And I'll give you a hint of how you can, and Margaret, this might be good for you in your entrepreneurship when your students want to develop apps, is play on people's egos. I go into this more when I talk about rewards, but if you could do a reward that if you people give you X amount of money, that you're going to have a character named after you. And so now that way people can say, I've been part of a game. Or you see this in the film industry where, it's not the old days, they still do it today, but people will pay to actually have their business, have their logo featured in that film. So it's kind of taking that same mindset when you look at doing app development in games. Is what can I give back? So it may not be tangible, but you have to kind of think about what people's egos, how they play going, that would be kind of cool. And even though maybe many of us on this webinar don't have that kind of thought process, there are people out there that have egos that like to see their names in lights as many places as possible. You can use the crowdfunding for creating marketing collateral. And then in the creative industry, we've seen a fair bit as well in publishing. So I've seen people use crowdfunding, in a sense, doing a pre-launch. So, if you contribute $30 or say $50 to this, you're going to get not just a copy of the physical book, but it's also going to be personally signed by the author, or you might get a free one-on-one coaching aspect. We've seen many crowdfunding projects come through the film, creative arts industry, drama, performing arts for any plays or shows, and you can do pre-selling tickets to shows. There is another, in a sense, a crowdfunding platform mainly for the movie industry, to where what they do is they pre-sell tickets. So if you're own a movie house in rural regional Australia, and you really want to get that movie there. Well, the the entities, they won't take that movie or they won't do that showing in that region unless they know that they're going to have enough people to go there and watch it. So what we're starting to see some crowdfunding platforms doing is they'll pre-sell the tickets to shows just on that. So once again, it becomes social proof to the promoter to say, look, we can guarantee we're going to get 100 people coming to this show, right? So does that make, hopefully that makes sense to everybody. All right. And then community groups, as I said, community groups definitely take advantage of the crowdfunding, and they can use it to get equipment. They can use it to, once again, even pre-sell tickets to events. And I'll show you an example later on of how the IT Forum, we've used it to gain sponsorship and then also various causes. Okay. Right. Okay, I'm just reading some of the group chats. Okay, so, right. Lorraine, you said, is that market trails?
Trials, it was meant to say.
Oh, okay, market trails. Yes. Yes. You can do market trials. Yeah, so that would be that social proof. Yeah, that's for clarification.
Okay. Like a feasibility.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, 100%. You know, because, okay. and just going back to that commercial thing in regards to social proof, same when it says, when I say leverage for grants, that can also be leverage for investors. You know, in that, in the whole fundraising space, in regard to startup space, you know, everybody has a great idea. What they like to see, even investors, is going, well, how else creative ways did you raise the money? So you can do the whole friends, family, and fools. But when you actually have a crowdfunding campaign and you can show maybe you only raised $10,000, but through that $10,000 you came up with a list of say 2,000 to 3,000 people. That almost shows that you have a pre-sale of 3,000 people who are actually interested in purchasing the product, which at the end of the day for any business, it's not about how much money you can raise, it's how much you can sell and keeping that business sustainable. So that becomes very important. So when we talk about leverage for grants, it can also be leverage for other capital raising methods. So I'll just show you some examples here that these were on the iPledge platform. This organization, individual, it was actually was a not-for-profit. They were raising money for bomb shelters in Israel, I think it was. And now theirs was an interesting project. They did theirs in stages. So the first stage that they did was they only raised like stage 1 of the shelter. So let's just say a shelter might cost $30,000 to raise. So phase 1, they said, we're going to raise 10, build it, and then when they would go, if they decide to go to phase 2, then they could show this is what we did in phase 1 of your money, here's what we're doing in phase 2. So many times people will come to me with a very big project and say, look, there's no way you're going to, when they have their list, we'll talk about this soon, that you're going to raise that kind of money. You need to break it down into various parts. There's another one of, this was a Canberra-based company. They were looking to raise some money to help send students over to New York for the UN Montessori conference, and they went way above their goal. So once again, education was a way of using stuff. Oops. No, didn't mean to click on that. This one here was, this guy was out of Melbourne. His girlfriend rang up and said, look, my boyfriend, he's only 21. He just finished his apprenticeship, got a whole bunch of tools. And it seemed that there was a thing happening down there that they would actually steal the trailers. And unfortunately, he didn't have the 7,000, and she just wanted to raise 1,000. And so through the efforts that I helped her out, put it on Facebook, they did raise it through the community. And what was interesting about that campaign, they were just holding steady at about $950. And it was like one day, and our campaign is an all or nothing campaign. And so I sent her an email and I said, would you please just do a quick shout out so you can get over the line. And sure enough, she did a shout out to her friends, and she got over the $1,000 mark and then got all the money. So that was another example, individual. And this guy here, once again, a kid out of Melbourne, just doing a small community project at his uni that he was doing, was only looking to raise 200 and got over the line, 12 backers. So a number of different ways you can do it. Even $200 can go a long way, and those who've worked in not-for-profit agencies totally know what I'm talking about. And this is what we did with the sponsorship for the IT Forum. Many times, not-for-profits, they'll go out to their list, and it's more of a push. So what we did with this one is we put it on, and then we did marketing, and we wanted to see who were interested in sponsoring a small event that they may not have been approached. So we had 4 backers, and I think really 3 of them were from our original, in a sense, database, and I think 1 came out of, through our various marketing efforts. So once again, you never know who might want to fund your program that is not on your existing list. And many not-for-profits didn't realize that they could use crowdfunding actually to assist in sponsoring the event. And it's to supplement, not the whole thing, right? So that just gives you a number of ideas that you can use to use crowdfunding for. So the 3 key areas before launching your campaign that's going to determine if it's going to be a success or failure. And now these are just the 3 that I've chosen that I think are important. If you talk to somebody else, they might think something different. So first off, get your story right. What's your story? We see it in news, magazines, okay? The headline, is that going to grab your attention? Just as on the internet, when you're trying to market your business, there's a lot of competition, a lot of there's a lot of crowdfunding platforms out there now. Even when you go on Kickstarter, there's thousands of campaigns on there that they're trying to get your money. So you need to grab them very quickly. So determining what's the story. And why should people care? So the one way that you can care, think about when you go to a movie or you read a good book. Right? It's appealing to the human emotions. How can you make them laugh? How can you make them angry? How can you make them, just feel warm and fuzzy and smile? How can you make them cry? So really tapping in that when you create your story, what emotion are you tapping into that's going to trigger them to take action? Why do cat videos go viral? Because they're silly and it makes people laugh, Cats and babies seem to be the thing that seems to go viral, or something that goes the other extreme of, if I look at what's happening in my, my native country, with certain decisions that are being made in government and throughout the country, certain things there go viral. Once again, what it's doing, it's tapping into the angry emotion. So the emotions are really, really important. You can also get the best results from video. If you do anything in digital marketing, we all know that video is the bomb. And the same thing in crowdfunding, that having video in your campaign more than doubles your chances of reaching the funding target. Now, I wouldn't say put all videos, like put video after video after video, but definitely your key first point of call is going to be that video. And it just needs to be a simple 1 to 3 minutes. There are other campaigns like FlowHive, if you've heard of that one. That campaign, that video I think went on for about 9 or 10 minutes. But when you go through that, they're taking you through the whole process of that. So it's almost like an educational video. But most of the videos, 1 to 3 minutes, and you really need to engage that viewer in the first 40 seconds, which is really challenging. And but if you can get that message across in that first even 30 seconds, then you're doing well. Of all the raises that were over that $1 million mark, statistically, 93% of them have video. So that just goes to show the importance of video. And when we have credibility, when we have video, just as like, you can see me, hopefully I'm increasing the credibility and trust. Okay, so trust is built in that credibility. So you have to question yourself, well, how am I going to make this story credible? So if you're asking for donations to build a school in a developing country, the way that you can increase that credibility is actually then to show, here's where we're going to build this school in the developing country. You go there. You show that you actually have the relationship there, because there, just as with everything else, there are a lot of scams out there, and crowdfunding is, can also be included in that. So think about that. The second thing is your list, okay? Is it more important to show the people behind the project in the video, or are they just focus on what the end result? I think it depends on the size of the project, and it depends on your list. As we look in this list is, I think if you show the people behind the project, that increases your credibility of their knowledge. So if it's if it's a project that definitely needs a lot of expertise, and you show that, and you show the people, then that increases the credibility of the project actually being delivered. All right. So yeah, so it would really depend on that project. It's a good question, right? So your list. So I've had people put campaigns up on iPledge and say, I'd like to raise $50,000 or like $100,000, and I would send them an email and say, well, how many people are on your list? And they would come back going, but I thought that's what you were going to do. No, the crowdfunding platforms, it is not their job to get you the money. Their job of a crowdfunding platform is just that. It's a platform for you to put your campaign on, which means before you go out to any campaign, or before you go out to do any crowdfunding campaign, look at your database, right? And not only looking at your database, but who's on it. I gave a presentation in Canberra to a not-for-profit company, and it was a sports organization, and they had a database of 7,000 people. And I said, do you even know who's on that? And they said, no. I said, oh my gosh, like you need to know who's on your list, because they could have used some people on the list, like professional athletes, and leverage them as a reward. So that list becomes very, very important. Statistically, 70% of the pledges come from people that are engaged by the project creator. So who's your networks? It comes back to, all right? And then 30% comes from people trolling the site. So if you're on Kickstarter or an iPledge, just know that 70% of that funding is going to come from your list. The rest of them may come from people just going, oh, that looks like an interesting project. And when they start to see other people have backed that project, then they want to be part of the crowd, right? They feel that they don't want to miss out. Right? And then the last one is you really need to reach 25% before strangers start pledging. So the other strategy there then is to launch your campaign or soft launch it to your list and saying, hey, I haven't made it go, out to the crowd, like to the world. Go ahead, jump in. I'm giving you the heads up. So by the time you actually do a full-on PR launch, people are they're going to come to your crowdfunding platform, your campaign, and go, wow, this is really starting to take traction. So it's about that perception. Other success rates from the list is that once you get over 20%, your project has an 80% chance of reaching its goal. And once it hits 30%, your chances of it being a successful campaign goes to 90%. And it's all about momentum. So you need to get out of the gate very quickly to reach that 30% mark that first week to have a higher rate of success, right? So that becomes very, very important. And I'll give you the example, okay? So Flowhive, they wanted to raise $70,000. They got a lot of TV play and everything else. They got to their 70,000, I think, within 24 to 48 hours. They continued to go to where they raised 12 million, as you can see. They had 37,000 funders. But here's what people, they probably know now, but at the time, these guys had already been having the conversation with their fans that they were doing this, okay? And their key followers were other beekeepers and bee lovers and etc. So by the time they actually launched their campaign, their crowd was already following them, right? And then they had that momentum and it just kept going. So it's a very classic example of how important it is to engage your list before you really launch your campaign to the crowd. And Lorraine, I see the question there about the cultural projects. I'll save that question to the end. Right. And then the third one is planning and strategy. Okay. Now look, if you're going for, and I've done this myself, if you're going to do a project and you're only trying to raise $200 to $300, you can probably just put it together in a day and just put it up there and and if you have a good list, you have really good networks, to come up with $300 is not that difficult. But if you're looking to come up with $5,000, you really need to figure out a plan and a strategy before you put your campaign up there. So part of that is, what's your budget? And as I said, I'm not going to go into this aspect with the cost rewards, but you might want to raise $5,000, but how much is it actually going to cost to put that campaign together? So it might cost you, if you don't have people contributing stuff for free, it might cost you maybe $200 to $500 to put the video together if you don't have that expertise. The rewards that you're putting together, if you're going to put together a gift pack and it's for $50, but that gift pack's actually going to cost $10, well, the amount that you're actually getting from that reward is only $40. So there's a whole formula that you go through in regards to the budget of costing out your crowdfunding campaign. And then the second one, and this is so important, is the marketing. Is what is your marketing strategy? Margaret, who's on the webinar, knows from working with entrepreneurs and businesses that one of their key reasons that they fail is they don't know how to market and sell themselves. So it's the same thing with the crowdfunding campaign. You really need to figure out which social media outlets you're going to use, what networks do you have that you can leverage off of, what PR strategies, which PR always goes right back to the beginning, is what's your story. So those are the three key factors. So in summary, we've covered crowdfunding is really just, taking your project to the crowd, telling a good story with the goal of getting them to give you money, preferably for your project. Then we looked at the many ways that you can use crowdfunding for your project or your business or your not-for-profit. And then the three things that are really important that I believe that you need to focus on before even considering launching your campaign is, first off, get your story right. Secondly, build that list. And third, figure out what plan of attack that you're going to take to get the word out to the marketplace so that they'll come and visit your crowdfunding campaign and give you money, and also share your story with other people as well. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm willing to, it's 1:04, but I'm willing to take any questions, and Lorraine had put one up touching upon the cultural projects and how you would approach this. I'll just finish here. There's my contact details. And I do run crowdfunding boot camps and seminars, which I can send information out. We won't be having one of those for about another month or so. Thanks, Lyndall. So let me just stop the share. Okay. So going through the cultural projects, Lorraine, can you give me a little bit more detail of what you're asking there?
I deal a lot with Indigenous.
Yeah.
So putting images up could be offensive to a number of different people on country. So
yeah, okay.
Have you ever had any experience in doing that for other cultural projects?
Well, we have had a few of those projects come on the platform. Once again, because they have the relationship, it really comes back to the relationships. They have the relationship with the organization that they're working with. So how they handle it individually, that I wouldn't be sure of, because it was their relationships that they have with their own organizations. And so we just serve as the platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second question I've got there is, I'm also working with schools under the STEM project for teaching. We want to get girls into being scientists, obviously, and career paths. Have you worked with schools in trying to raise the funds? Because it's not a cheap exercise for a lot of schools that are self-funded.
Yep. Yeah, well, that one project that I showed you, that was all schools based. There was another project in in Brisbane, they were raising money to take a whole bunch of young entrepreneurs from their school to go to Roger Hamilton for 2-3 days, and they went over their goal easily. And schools are, believe it or not, schools are fairly easy to work with because they would already have the database from the parents. And then you think about parents and the aunts and uncles and everything. I remember back when I was in high school many years ago, it was the same thing where my dad had the networks and he kind of gave me the leads and he said, go ask for money. So it was, once again, it comes back to what's the story. With the organization that were raising money for the entrepreneurs, they had the really good story of, hey, here's an international entrepreneur, Roger Hamilton. They want to go to the weekend. This will be a great exposure for the students as well as the school to encourage the youth of today to become the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. So the same thing with STEM would be such an easy one. I would say, especially because it's a hot topic. It's not something foreign to the individual. It's, the government is already backing it. It's already part of their conversation, and many of the schools are coming on board as well. So if it's looking to get equipment for like a maker's lab or a maker space, that becomes quite good. And the other thing it can do then when you use crowdfunding, depending on, and look, you don't have to go for a big raise. It could just be that you're looking to raise $1,000 to buy a little bit of equipment for the makerspace. When you show that you have that, then you can go to a bigger sponsor. Now, and I understand schools, there's sometimes political things regarding bigger sponsors. But once again, it comes back to that social proof of saying, well, look, we've already raised $1,000 and we have, X number of people that are part of this program. Then depending on who the sponsor is, they'll say, well, we definitely want to be aligned with that. And it can also, when, as many schools are going for government funding, it once again shows that social proof to government that your school is being quite creative in securing those funds.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate your answer.
Yep, no worries.
You've given us your contact details, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So, how do I retrieve our?
What I'll be doing is, so this is being recorded and it'll be saved to the cloud. And so once it's finished, then I'll send a copy of the link to the recording that you guys can go back to it and listen at your leisure and take down any notes that you might have missed.
That would be wonderful. Look, thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you, everybody. So is there any other questions before we close out?
No, thank you.
All right, fantastic. Well, everybody, enjoy your day wherever you're from. And I'll be sending out more information when we have another webinar, which will be very soon.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right.